Good morning. Be turning to Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6. We've been talking about encounters with Jesus. People who have crossed paths with him for one reason or another, how he's treated them, dealt with them, blessed them, loved them, regardless of their attitude toward him. And as Scott mentioned this morning, we'll be looking at the Nazarenes. We're looking at the Nazarenes from a little different perspective, maybe. For a minute, I want you to think about home. Home is a word that brings back fond memories for most people, doesn't it? You think of home, takes you back to your childhood, to your family, childhood friends. I was raised in an oil field camp, one of those oil field brats. We were 17 miles from town. It was like a little community out there. I made many a run to the neighbors for a cup of sugar or a pound of flour or whatever. We helped each other out there. Almina Braden was the nurse. She was an RN at the hospital in town, but everybody went to Almina's house if they had the first severe cut I had. Almina put a butterfly Band-Aid on it. I grabbed an apple and a knife and I went shoo, right across his finger, but no problem. Almina was 2 doors down. She took good care of me. A few years back, I was fortunate enough to get on my motor scooter and ride to San Diego, California. Dreamed about it my whole life. When I realized I was 7 miles from my home, the camp, I just had to go over there. I rode over there, and the gates, there weren't any gates for cattle guards, but cattle guards were still there. Went in. It was a big oval on 2 sides. At one time, it was completely full of homes. When I was young, one side, the houses had already been moved out, and so we just had one side that was houses, and the other side was for us to play in. No houses left. All the trees were dead and the yards were gone. But all the memories that came alive. You know, that's where I learned to walk and talk, literally. It's where I learned to ride a bicycle and then a motorcycle. I've been riding scooters since I was about this tall. That's where I learned how to shoot. 9 years old, and I was walking outside the camp. There was a fence all the way around it. I could get outside the camp and hunt with my 20-gauge shotgun, 9 years old, as long as I didn't get out of sight of my mother and the front porch. But that was easy to do. Anybody do that kind of thing today? I not only learned to shoot, I learned what to shoot and what not to shoot. Guess how I learned what not to shoot? Got a BB gun for my birthday, my 7th birthday. I went out in the front yard and shot our dog and lost it for 2 weeks. I got to shoot it once. Home. That's where I learned to choose good over evil, to know the difference. It's where I learned what it meant to love God. That's where I learned what it meant to put him first. It's where I learned what it means when you don't. Home. As we look at Mark chapter 6, I wonder if maybe Jesus was a little bit excited about going home. You know, we read of this homecoming here in Mark chapter 6. And of course, he would have known what to expect, but can't help but think that it had fond memories going through his mind. He had human emotions and no doubt fond memories of this home where he was raised and taught and cared for. After all, it's where he learned as a young child, isn't it? But if he was excited to be home, unfortunately, excitement couldn't have lasted very long. And we read the text here. And we understand what he says, hopefully, because we need to make application to our lives here this morning. Verse 1 through 6. Then he went out from there and came to his own country, and his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath had come, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many hearing him were astonished, saying, "Where did this man get these things? And what wisdom is this which is given to him, that such mighty works are performed by his hands?" Be sure you hear that. How is it that he is performing these mighty works? Verse 3, "Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" His family is still there. So they were offended at him. But Jesus said to him, "A prophet is not without honor except in his own country, among his own relatives, and in his own house." Now he could do no mighty work there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. Then he went about the villages in a circuit, teaching. The setting is Jesus' home. It says his own country. His brothers and sisters. It's his stomping grounds, we might say. Again, I have no doubt that he had some emotions when he realized, "I'm going home." I suspect he was hopeful. Anybody go home to their class reunions? Anybody go home and try to reconnect? We're told in verse 2, while he's there, he did what he always did, and he went to the synagogue and taught. But it was immediately recognized that he wasn't like any other teacher. He had wisdom from somewhere. And it says mighty works were performed by his hands. His teaching and his power caused these local homies, we might call them, to wonder, how did he come to possess that kind of wisdom, that kind of power? Verse 3. These hometown folks knew who he was growing up, didn't they? "Isn't this the carpenter?" They recognized him. But we need to pay attention here. Why were they so amazed and confused at the same time? Do you think they hadn't heard of Jesus and what was going on? They were amazed and confused because Jesus was born a child like you and me. He was brought up as a young boy. We don't get a lot of details about that, but we know it happened. We start hearing about him when he's 12. Well, you don't just get born and be 12. Something happens between those times, doesn't it? And it happened here at his home. He lived and grew like you and me. He was just like these homies before. But now, he has something that they had never seen. He has something they don't understand, and they don't understand how he got it. They remember Jesus as a local boy, a carpenter. And they certainly dismissed the possibility that he could be something greater. Verse 3. And it also says in verse 3, because of that, they were offended at him. I think it would be better for us to say it or think it, they took offense. Jesus' intent was certainly not to offend. But because of their disbelief, he only healed a few people, it says in verse 5. And it says he could do no mighty work there. You know, that Greek literally means that he was not able to do a miracle there. Does that mean he didn't have the power to do it? Of course not. It says, in fact, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. Who else had the power to do that? Mighty works performed by his hand, a demonstration of his power. But as was said before, because of their disbelief, it wasn't appropriate or expedient for him to do more. So he didn't. And the text says in verse 6, he marveled because of their unbelief. He was amazed. He couldn't believe. They couldn't believe. How could it even be? How could they see that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them and still not believe? Was it just because they're just a few? Oh, he only healed a few. He healed them. If we had been there and seen those things, we would have, what? Jesus marveled. He was amazed. He couldn't believe they didn't believe. Could you imagine Jesus doing all of these things, these mighty powers he was putting on display? For what reason? To bear witness of who he was. And yet they wouldn't believe, as if everybody that comes through does those kinds of things. Can't imagine Jesus' disappointment. It says he marveled, he's amazed. He can't quite understand how it could happen. Their denial was astonishing even to Jesus. Obviously, a few lessons we need to take from this. First is there's just no excuse. Romans 1:20, since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. God's creation takes away any excuse we might have. Jesus comes to Nazareth. He already has an established reputation for mighty works. Everyone had heard of him. Far too many had witnessed his works for it to go unnoticed. Far too many had heard his teaching. His reputation preceded him, and then he did mighty works in their presence, but they were unmoved. Think about it. If you can imagine, their skepticism even caused Jesus to scratch his head in amazement. Can't believe this. And if that was true then, how much more true is it today? With all the things we have, all the evidence we have, when we fail to believe. It's amazing. We study the most supported and proven book ever written. There's more evidence of God than anybody could ever hope for. Something else we learn is familiarity can certainly bring disrespect, can't it? We, like these people in Nazareth, think, well, I know that guy. Yeah, I know that guy. You think but I've watched him grow up. Ever said that? He used to be just like us. What happened to him? Who does he think he is? Certainly we need to overcome our pride. We need to learn to make an effort to listen to people, to pay attention, especially when it has to do with our salvation. And this is Jesus we're talking about. James 1 verse 17 says, every good gift and every perfect gift is from above and comes down from the Father of lights. We know that includes our brothers and sisters and the gospel and our Savior, don't we? And we learn, maybe sadly, that there comes a time when you just have to move on. We can't make people be saved. Sometimes it's heartbreaking. Janelle and I were talking this morning. Her dad had a brother out of 12 children. Him and his brother Johnny were very close. And he studied with Johnny and prayed for Johnny, and Johnny never would believe. She was remembering how long he cried when Johnny died. It can be heartbreaking when people refuse to believe. We want people to know what we know. We want them to experience what we experience. We want them to have peace that passes understanding. We want them in heaven with us someday. But they may not want that. You can be certain that nobody was more brokenhearted than Jesus. He hurt in his heart when he walked away from his friends, his hometown neighbors, even his family, and even worse, he was walking away from his own creation. He said in Matthew 10:14, whoever will not receive you or hear your words when you depart from that house or city, shake off the dust from your feet. That's what he was preparing to do. And earlier in Matthew 7 verse 6, don't give what's holy to the dogs, or cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you in pieces. Jesus taught, sometimes you have to walk away. And we realize then that even though they would not believe, he was still going to go to the cross for them. Their unbelief did not change the love he had for them. And neither does it change the love he has for us. We need to make a decision about Jesus. If you haven't ever, you need to make a decision. It is up to you. Nobody can make you take advantage of the promises. Can't do it. It's something you do, and it is up to you. You can't do it for me. I can't do it for you. You have to make your own decision, and then you also must face the consequences of your own decision. You know, you will stand and answer in the very presence of God someday. Hebrews 2 verse 3, how shall we escape if we neglect so great a salvation? Where else are we going to go for salvation? He says this salvation was at the first spoken by the Lord and confirmed to us by those who heard him. Jesus taught salvation. How many signs and wonders did he do to help even the most stubborn of people believe? And his apostles then carried out his work, confirming his gospel of salvation with their own works and their words, and yes, even their very lives. The same writer in Hebrews 12:25 says it a different way. See that you do not refuse him who speaks. For if they didn't escape who refused him who spoke on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven. The writer says, pay attention. Listen. You're listening to the words of God here, not man. Man can't save you. Jesus can. He says you will not escape if you turn away from him. So what is your decision? What will you decide today? Do you believe? Do you? You know, it's something you do, and it's up to you. Are you ready to face the consequences of your decision? So I ask you, can we help you follow through with your decision to believe? If you've decided to believe, we want to help you know God's will for your life and do those things so you can take advantage of that salvation from Jesus. We can help you with that. Surely you wouldn't turn away from the one who speaks from heaven, would you? If you have a need this morning, please make a decision. Step up, come down. Let us help you. Let us help you. Won't you come while we stand and sing together our invitation?